Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. So in this video, we will be looking into application set in ArgoCD. So if we look into my previous video where I have discussed about ArgoCD, so what is ArgoCD and how we can install ArgoCD in EKS cluster. So all those information you would be able to get into my previous video, right? And in my previous video, I have also installed an application in Kubernetes using ArgoCD. So how we can do that and everything, detailed information has been shared in that video, right? So in this video, we will be talking about application set. So application set is basically an object in ArgoCD that we can create. So basically what happened when we use ArgoCD, we used to create applications in it, right? So an application that we install in ArgoCD that can contain like multiple services, multiple deployments, and everything, right? Which gets deployed into Kubernetes. So using application set, what we can do is we can deploy multiple applications. So let's suppose we have multiple applications and we have multiple Kubernetes clusters as well, right? And a requirement is to deploy all these multiple applications in all of these Kubernetes clusters. So a real world scenario could be, for example, we have a DR setup. Let's suppose we have a Kubernetes cluster in Mumbai region, and we have another Kubernetes cluster in Singapore. So there's a requirement, for example, if we are deploying any application in Mumbai region, which is our primary Kubernetes cluster, we would also need to deploy the versions of that application at the same time in Singapore as part of the DR. So in case a DR happens and our Mumbai region goes down, immediately our traffic will be routed to Singapore region using Route 53. So Route 53 will immediately route our traffic to Singapore, and at the same time we would need our application to have the same version deployed which was deployed in primary region. So let's suppose we have application version 1.1 deployed here in Mumbai region, and the same version should be installed in in our Singapore region, the 1.1 version, right? So that can be done using application set. What we can do is we can define our application in Kubernetes in Argo CD to be deployed in our primary Kubernetes cluster, which is in Mumbai, and at the same time, the same application will be deployed in our Singapore region, right? So this is what we are going to do in this particular video. So for this video, what I'll be doing is I'll have a Kubernetes cluster in Mumbai region, and the other Kubernetes cluster again will be in Singapore region, right? Because both are in different region, and both will have the different VPCs. So what I'll do is I'll create a VPC pairing connection between both Kubernetes cluster, so that from Mumbai region I would be able to access both Kubernetes cluster from a single Bastion machine. So I'll deploy a Bastion machine here in one of the region in Mumbai, and the same Bastion machine would be able to access the primary Kubernetes cluster and the Singapore Kubernetes cluster, right? So to achieve that, I'll create a VPC pairing here, VPC pairing between both the regions. And at the same time, what I'll do is I'll deploy Argo CD in Mumbai region, and this Argo CD will be configured to deploy application on both Kubernetes clusters in Mumbai region as well as in Singapore region. So I'll deploy an application there, and we'll see how that application will be deployed, right? And we'll try to make few changes in that application, and we'll see if those changes are getting reflected in both of the regions, right? So this is what we are doing as part of the demo in this video. Okay, so I'm in my AWS console now, and I have created the Kubernetes clusters. So in Singapore region, I have another one Kubernetes cluster named Balwinder Cluster 2, and this cluster has two EC2 instances which are in ready state. So we are good to access these clusters, and we also have a VPC in Singapore region. So this is a VPC that I created, and this VPC does have a VPC pairing connections which is to Mumbai region. So anyone from Mumbai region, from the Mumbai VPC would be able to access the resources in our Singapore region. So if I'll go to my Singapore region, so let me show you what changes I have made. So in Singapore, sorry, in my Mumbai region, I have a VPC. So I created a VPC pairing connection between Mumbai to Singapore, right? So one important thing that I have updated is so the Kubernetes cluster in Singapore region. So if I'll show you that, if I'll go to Singapore again and I'll go to EKS cluster. So if I'll go to the security group of this particular EKS cluster, so I have updated an entry. So this is my IP address from Bastion machine because I should be able to access the EKS cluster in both region from one Bastion machine, like I have shown in the demo here. So this is my one Bastion machine, and this Bastion machine should be able to access the Kubernetes cluster in Mumbai region as well as the Kubernetes cluster in Singapore region. So this is happening because of the VPC pairing, and I'll have to update the security group in Singapore region to allow the IP address of Bastion machine. So this is what I have done here. I have allowed the IP address of Bastion machine from Mumbai region. And at the same time, what I have done is I have created an access entry in my Singapore region EKS cluster. So this is the access entry that I have created. So I have passed the IAM role of that Bastion instance, and this IAM role should have access to EKS cluster admin policy, right? So that's how my Bastion machine is able to access the Singapore region EKS cluster. So if I'll go to my Bastion machine, and if I'll show you the context that I have with my kubectl, so kube config get context. So these are the two contexts that I have. One, the cluster one is in Mumbai region. If I'll try to use this context here, kubectl config use context, this one, I should be able to see the nodes. Yep. So my kubectl command is working for this particular Mumbai region, and if I'll do it for Singapore, I'll just copy this one. The cluster is cluster 2. Okay, I'll have to update the region as well. Okay, so my context is changed. If I'll do kubectl get nodes, I should be able to see the nodes. So yeah, this is working fine. And what I have done is I have also deployed ArgoCD in Mumbai region Kubernetes cluster, which is accessible over here. So I'm able to access this ArgoCD. This is a fresh ArgoCD. No application is deployed here. So what I'll do is I'll create an application set, and I'll try to deploy that application set in ArgoCD. So that set should deploy that particular application in both of the Kubernetes cluster, right? So for that, what I'll do is I'll take a reference from ArgoCD documentation. So this is the documentation. I'll mention the link of this documentation in description tab. So from here, what I'll do is I'll use this particular template, right, to create an application set. So first what I'll do is I'll just copy this one and I'll paste it in one of my editor. So this is the application set. So this is the API version that we are using. This is Argo project, which is a CRD that gets deployed when we deploy Argo CD in Kubernetes cluster, and the kind is application set. So before going further, what I'll do is I'll just give you an example of a deployment. So if we look into this deployment, so there are things, let's say in this deployment, when we create a deployment in Kubernetes, we used to define template, right? And inside this template, we used to define the cluster container definitions, right? So one deployment can have multiple containers, right? And we can define that multiple pods in a template in a deployment, right? So the same way in Argo CD application set we used to define a template here, and in this template we used to define Argo CD applications, right? The same way we used to define pods in a deployment, the same way we used to define applications in application set, right? So these are the application generator. So there are not three, there are multiple types of generator. So there are list generator, there are cluster generators, and there's a git generator, and there are so on. So as of now, we are using list generator here. So it will be used to generate parameters which are substituted in templates, right? So here we have created a couple of parameters in this list generator. So this is a cluster parameter which named as engineering dev, but we will change it to our Kubernetes cluster's name, and this is the URL of that particular Kubernetes cluster. And we are using these parameters further in our template. So this URL we are using here, right, as a parameter. So we are passing this parameter in our template in our application set. So let me show you how it will work. Let me remove this deployment. We don't need it here. So what I'll do is I'll create an application set and I'll give it a name. So my application name would be, let's say I'll deploy a stock shop application. This is an application provided by ArgoCD, and we can search it over here. So if I'll go to GitHub ArgoCD, if I'll search with GitHub ArgoCD example apps. So over here, this is the application that we are going to deploy, stock shop, right? So this is a public repository. So I'll pass the repository URL in ArgoCD, right? So I'll name this application as stock shop. So this is the specifications, and this is the list generator that we will create here. So we only have two EKS clusters. So what I'll do is I'll give it a name. Let me give it a name like Mumbai, and the other Kubernetes cluster will be in Singapore. So I'll give it a name as a Singapore. So I'll have to update the endpoints here as well. So I'll fetch the endpoint from my AWS console. So I'll go to Mumbai region here. Okay, this is the cluster. I'll copy this API server endpoint and I'll put it here. And similarly, put the endpoint of Singapore. I'll put the endpoint of Singapore EKS cluster. So this is the cluster and this is the endpoint. I'll put it here. We don't have the third EKS cluster, so I'll remove this entry. And in template, we can use these parameters and we can define our application here. So my application name is sock shop. So what this will do, dot cluster is the parameter. So this will create two different applications. So if for Mumbai EKS cluster, it will create an application named Mumbai sock shop. And for Singapore EKS cluster, it will create an application named Singapore sock shop application, right? So that we would be able to see in our ArgoCD UI, right? And the project I'll use here is default. I will not create any new project. So this is the source. So repo URL we can pass here. So our repository that contains our application. So this is the repository. I'll just copy this HTTP URL from here and I'll put this one, and the target revision would be head, which means the master branch, and we can pass the path here. So our application path would be in our repository, it is sock shop. So I'll just do sock shop, right? So this is our application path, and the destination would be our .url, which means both of our Kubernetes cluster, because we are having two parameters, two variables of the URL. So this will create two applications in both of these URLs, right? So this is going to be the server, which is the Mumbai and Singapore. So both will be picked up here, and the namespace would be, I'll do default here. I'll not create any new namespace, but we would be able to do that. We can define our namespace here, and it will be deployed to that particular namespace. So I think our application set manifest file is created, and we can quickly deploy it. So what I'll do is I'll go to my Bastion machine. I'll create let I'll create this YAML file. I'll just paste this YAML file here, and I'll just do kubectl apply -f sock shop and in namespace ArgoCD, because we are deploying, because this is a CRD, right, which is ArgoCD CRD, which gets deployed by ArgoCD, and this is an application set which is part of the ArgoCD. So we are creating this particular application set in ArgoCD namespace, and ArgoCD, so it's ArgoCD's responsibility to deploy this application in default namespace in our both Kubernetes cluster, right? So we are deploying application set in ArgoCD namespace, but the actual application will be deployed in the namespace that we have specified in template block. So this should not create any confusion. I'll just click and enter. So my application set should be created. So if I'll do kubectl, I'll get application set in ArgoCD namespace. So I can see it here. 11 seconds ago it got created. And let's go to this application in this UI. So I should see these two applications got created, right? So these are in unknown state and it should be available now. Okay, sorry. There's one more thing that we should do, and we haven't done that. Is that in our Argo CD in clusters, we didn't added the Singapore cluster here. So if we look into this application, so the Mumbai application will be deployed, but the Singapore application will not be deployed. So if I'll, so this is out of sync. We can just refresh the application and we can click on this sync button. So it will get in sync. Yeah, so as you can see, the pods are getting created in our Mumbai EKS cluster, but the same application is not getting deployed in Singapore. And the reason is because we haven't added the Singapore cluster in Argo CD. So to do that, what I'll need to do is I'll have to install Argo CD CLI in my Bastion machine, and from here I'll have to run this Argo CD cluster add command so that I would be able to add a cluster in Argo CD. So I'll again go to one of the documentation in Argo CD to install Argo CD CLI, Argo CD CLI installation. So I'll go here. So there are few commands. If you are with Mac OS, you can do brew install Argo CD. Because my Basher machine is Linux based, so I'll use this particular command. So this is for AMD 64. Yeah, this is the correct command. I'll copy this one and I'll paste it here. Yes. Okay, so I think Argo CD CLI is installed. So yeah, I'm able to access that. So to add a cluster, what I'll have to do is we'll have to log into the Argo CD. So we'll have to do Argo CD login here, Argo CD login, and then the endpoint of this Argo CD UI where the Argo CD is deployed. So I'll just copy this one and I'll paste it here. Yes. So the username is admin and the password here is, so this is the password for my admin user. I'll paste it here. So Argo CD logged in successfully, which is good. And now we'll run Argo CD cluster add command. So I'll just get the config again here, Argo kubectl config get context. So this is the context of our Singapore EKS cluster. I'll just copy this one and we'll have to pass this context with our Argo CD CLI. What I'll do is Argo CD cluster add and then this context that we would like to add. So it's saying yes, do you want to continue? Yes. So it is creating a couple of cluster roles, cluster role binding, so that Argo CD would be able to manage the other Kubernetes cluster, right? So this Argo CD needs some sort of admin permission so that it would be able to create namespace, it would be able to create deployments and services. So yeah. So there's one more thing because it's taking a couple of minutes to be done. It should not take more than few seconds. But what I suspect is because of some security group thing that I have not configured properly. Because Argo CD is deployed in EC2 instances, so those EC2 instances in Mumbai region, because Argo CD is in Mumbai region, so those EC2 instances should be able to access other Kubernetes clusters. So if I'll go to my AWS console, so I'm in my AWS console, I'll go to Mumbai region, right? So this is the cluster. So what I'll do is in my, so just to make it quite simple, in my Singapore region, I'll go to this cluster and in my cluster security group, what I'll do is I'll just allow the VPC CIDR from Mumbai region. Edit inbound rule, I'll do HTTPS and I will be allowing the CIDR range of my VPC in Mumbai region, right? So this is going to be that. I'll save it. So now allowed this particular CIDR range from Mumbai region. So if I'll try to do it again, I should not see this error. Yes. So this EKS cluster is added successfully. If I'll go to ArgoCD again, and if I'll refresh this page, I should be able to see other EKS cluster here, right? And if I'll go to applications, so this application is not deployed yet, but what I'll do is I'll just click this sync button here again, so that ArgoCD will sync this application again in Singapore region. Okay, I'll click refresh here. I'll just try to refresh this application. Okay, so application is refreshed, and I'll click the sync button now. So it should be sync now. Yeah, so this is getting syncing, and yeah, sync is okay, and we could see the pods are up and running here. The pods are getting deployed in Singapore region. Right, so as you can see, this is our Mumbai application and this is our Singapore application. And if we make any changes to any of this application, let's say a new version gets deployed for our Mumbai region, so the same version will be deployed to Singapore region, right? So this is how we can maintain the same versions in a DR scenario. So when we want to have multiple EKS clusters, so we can do that using ArgoCD using ApplicationSet. Right, so here we can define multiple Kubernetes clusters here in a list generator, and we can define the template for that, and it will be deployed to all those EKS clusters, right? So this is it for this video, and I hope this would be helpful for you, and yeah, that's it. Thank you for your time.